We are also broadcasting live on YouTube.
Yeah, I'm just going to go ahead and tweet that link, actually.
Okay. So for those of you who are watching on YouTube, feel free to use the comments on there. Or you still have time if you want to jump on the website and register. You can register and join the live webinar as well on Zoom. I'm actually just going to change my screen share settings. It looks like the side-by-side screen share isn't showing as nice on YouTube as I'd like it to. So just give me a second on that. I'm going to stop my share and start it one more time. There we go. Got, looks like we got 7 or 8 folks already joined. That's great. Okay, the live stream share is much better now too. Okay, that's awesome. Just gonna wait a couple more minutes here for a few more folks to join. And just a reminder too, if you have any questions, please ask those in the chat window, in the Q&A window. Happy to answer those as we go along, and we'll try to make this as interactive as possible. All right, well, it's 12:02 and we're gonna get started. Welcome to Agility Days. This is the first of a series of webinars coming up every 2 weeks where we'll have online webinars split into 2 different tracks. The first track is gonna be digital leaders with insights and advice from entrepreneurs, partners, customers, and others that are specifically gonna help you, and other industry leaders to help you create your business that's more agile and to help you specifically with your online presence and to really sort of boost you forward in the industry. But we'll also have a track focused on developers, where we'll share tools, tips, techniques from ourselves, from our partners, and other developers who are leading the charge towards a faster, more agile web. So that being said, let's get started. Welcome to the future of CMS. Most important slide today, we're here to learn about each other and from each other. We're all in this together. I encourage you to ask questions. It's okay to interrupt. Put up your hand in the Q&A thing here. If you're viewing this as a recording, feel free to comment. We'll be monitoring those comments, and we want to be able to see the feedback. So I'm here as one of your hosts today with as Joel Vardy. I'm president of Agility CMS. And I'm here with James Vidler, who's VP of Product. James joins us as he's a really interesting guy. He not only is he a longtime software developer and web developer, but he also does VR on the side. And he's the new owner of a dog. So he's really happy about that.
Thanks, Joel. Thanks for that pleasant, warm welcome.
Cool. We also have a very special guest with us today, and this is really cool to have him on the line. So just as sort of a geography, I'm out in Port Hope, Ontario, small town. Don't be misled by the background behind me. That's a Zoom background. James is in Toronto. But we have joining us today from Vancouver, our special guest, John Voigt, who's CEO and co-founder of Agility CMS. some interesting things about John. He's also a dad of two young lads who have almost as much energy as he does. And I've worked with John for many years. I often get calls and messages late at night, early in the morning with some of his ideas and things or problems or things that he's working through. And I think that's a measure of not only a good leader, but also a really great innovator, someone who has the courage to reach out and bounce ideas off people. And really looking forward to hearing his insights today on the future of CMS. So welcome, John.
Thanks, Joel. Every time you keep talking about starting at 12 o'clock, I'm like, what's going on? Because I'm on the West Coast. So for me, it's only 9 o'clock, and you're right. Sometimes I try to surprise you when you get up with things and you're like, how did you get that up so early for me?
Yeah. Or there's emails that come in at 10 or 11 p.m. our time.
or 1 or 2 a.m.
Yeah. For sure. Well, just to sort of set some context for how we're going to be talking about CMS, I want to just identify that we're in a new age of the web. The CMS era with web really started back in 2000 with the .com era. And then CMS as we know it now, in terms of more traditional CMS, really began in 2005 with things like WordPress and some other sort of products that came around. But then in 2015, a decade later, the SaaS area really started to take off. And that's where cloud became a big deal. And that's sort of grown and grown throughout, throughout those few years up until now, when you have, whereas Headless CMS, this really API driven CMS, is really what I'd call it crossing the chasm in terms of going from, as an early adopter things, several years ago to now. This is a mainstream concept that most enterprises are really starting to get behind, and people are really adopting fast. And yeah, sorry, go ahead, John.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think there's some interesting things around here where we don't really talk about it here with digital experience platforms, DXP, and these other things. But there was the kind of mesh along the same process as well. Whether you call it a CMS or a DXP, obviously DXP very, very focused on the user experience, very focused on personalization, integration of e-commerce, other channels, and that really grew between that CMS era beginning and that SaaS era as well. And it as well kind of got a little bit more stale from 2015 onwards, and we'll talk about that a little bit for sure.
And actually, I have a question here. Is thinking of CMSs out there, where would WordPress sort of sit in these buckets? What would you guys think they would be considered?
I would say it follows the same trend, except they were earlier on the cloud side than a lot. And there's a couple CMSs that were really, really early on in that kind of cloud kind of SaaS model. We fit in that bucket. I know there's Crown Peak, there's a whole bunch of other ones like that weren't necessarily just install based. They were in the cloud as an application. So they were earlier on the cloud side, which is great. And I think one of the reasons why they got some really good momentum.
Yeah, and it's interesting too, when you talk about cloud, some CMS platforms are, cloud native, as in they are a SaaS hosted, cloud product, whereas some of them are, they work in the cloud, whereas you have to install them in the cloud. So it's still an installed product that has upgrades and things like that, but it's not necessarily sort of cloud native. So there's a lot of, where the terms get a little blurred.
Yeah, definitely. And we'll talk about the headless term and Contentfirst, I hope, at some point, because those terms are getting thrown around a lot, and there's definitely some confusion there.
For sure. I had this slide, and John doesn't know this one's coming up. And it's a really interesting one. We came across this the other day, and here is John Voight, circa 2003, 2004. A young entrepreneur with his and I think this is at a trade show with his new company at the time, Identity Consulting.
Wow. I don't know where you found this. This is, Agility used to be, we started out as a company called Identity Consulting back in 2002. That's crazy you found this. And the diagram behind me and on the left-hand side and on the computer screen.
Wait, John, I got to zoom in. Wait, look at this.
You can zoom in.
I'm all ready to zoom in.
Oh my God.
Tell us about this diagram,
I'm zoomed
John.
in too. That's not good. So behind my head there, it actually says Web Connect, Rich Site Gateway. So that was actually Agility 1.0. And in the background, you can see that little icon in the middle was the logo for the product. So the product was in the cloud, and then used XML at that point. So web services and all those things were really hot at the beginning of 2000. We built Agility as a gateway to push content out. So it was, we'll start talking about headless APIs and those things. We had a lot of that stuff back then, and we had another picture with those circles. Each one was an app or a website or a display board, TV. So we had all these different devices that were playing content. So yeah, that's crazy. You found that.
So what you're saying is what you're saying is you really pioneered the headless system, right? You just didn't call it headless.
It wasn't called headless back then. It was decoupled. It was, disconnected. Our websites and solutions are always built outside of our CMS. They're not built on the CMS. So you don't customize the CMS. You communicate with the CMS. So yeah, we were very early in that process. And as headless has kind of taken off, and a lot of our customers have been on the platform for a very long time, they've seen huge benefits of that architecture. All the way back, but also now where more people are moving on to that with the headless kind of model.
So just John, glad we moved on from XML.
Yeah. Oh yeah. So John, we've talked about sort of the history of CMS, and how you with Agility have always been a real sort of proponent to lean towards a decoupled model, Contentfirst model, but just talking about traditional CMS for a little while, because I think that's the conversation you've been having for more than a decade with customers is, what is traditional CMS? How does CMS actually work? And now that, you could say that headless CMS has really crossed the chasm and become mainstream, the question sort of leads me to is traditional CMS dead?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I definitely don't think it's dead yet. So just to kind of define the term traditional CMS, generally this is a content management system that's very focused on websites, website development, website management, and it can have a whole bunch of other additional tools built into it, or it can just be focused on the website. So, anything from just a web content management system to a DXP kind of fits into this bucket. There's definitely a huge movement to headless CMSs, to a content-first approach, and that is definitely hurting traditional CMSs in that kind of model. But they're not dead yet because people are still using them. But it is going to be a slow migration, I think, or a big transformation for a lot of these traditional systems, because you don't generally a traditional system, you build your website on top of the CMS. So the two systems are one. And the problem with that is your website is then tied to the CMS. And in that sense is, well, let's say you want to add another system, or you want to change your CMS, or you want to scale it up. Your whole success is dependent heavily on that CMS in terms of its performance, its capabilities, those things. So it just doesn't give you the flexibility and the agile side of twisting and turning the way the world turns. It's harder to integrate. It's harder to do multi-channel because that CMS is going wherever your website goes. So,
yeah, and I just want to add to that too. I think I think the good parts, the thing that traditional CMS actually has going for it, is the fact that you can, they're fairly good at giving you a lot of stuff that just sort of works out of the box. So, I think for some people who are just getting started, there are some good options out there, but sooner or later, as you said, as your business grows and your needs change, you're going to end up kind of stuck with what you have and unable to move forward. Or even worse, you're going to have to hack around those things to actually get done what you need to get done.
Yeah, it's a great point. If you have a certain type of website, you can spin that out really fast on a traditional CMS, but you're limited in what you do because generally you use pre-built templates, you can use pre-built modules and plugins. A lot of times those don't get upgraded. You get kind of stuck in that path. A lot of times, they're rigid, or if you want to customize them, you're already getting into the code and doing all sorts of stuff that you could build in a more flexible way anyway. So there's definitely use cases where they are better and they're the right model. But if you want a lot of flexibility and you want the system to grow with you over time, it can be more difficult with those platforms.
For sure.
Yeah, I mean, so we've sort of established that certainly headless CMS is a big deal. And I know in my own conversations with both customers and partners that lots of folks are considering headless CMS where they wouldn't have considered it before. And a lot of it is because they want content to go not just to the website, but to other places as well. And they want to be able to rebuild the front end of the website without having to redo all the content. And so that leads us towards a concept that I've heard you talk about a lot, John, which is something called content first. And I'd like you to talk about I don't want to talk about headless CMS, talk about the concept of content first.
Yeah, great. So I think this is really important to bring up. Everyone, headless CMS is a huge buzzword. It's everywhere. And content first is related to it heavily, but it's not the same thing. So content first is where you build your solutions, you think about your solutions from a content first perspective versus a website first perspective from most the traditional CMS and the mindset. So you can actually use a headless CMS and build a solution with a website first approach, which kind of defeats the purpose or a lot of the benefits or some of the benefits of a headless CMS. So content first is you look at your content structures, you look at how you manage your content, you look at the back end of how you use it. So you need to make sure that is done well, because then you can't work on the front end. A great example is, if you go back 3-5 years, everyone's focused on customer experience. The website experience has got to be beautiful. It's got to, have nice workflows. People need to find their content and need to do what they want to do. And they focus so much on that, digital experience side of things, the customer experience side of things, that they forgot about the back end. They forgot about their content and how they manage it and how they relate it and all those things. And so what happens is you build a beautiful customer experience initially, but over time, that customer experience starts to go down. The quality of that goes down because you can't actually manage your content properly. You can't manage your relationships. Your team isn't working effectively. And so you don't have this utopia, beautiful back end that's easy to manage things. And so your customer experience starts to suffer over time. And by doing a content first approach, focusing on that back end, what it does is it allows you to build a model that's beautiful, easy to manage, really organized, reusable content that can go to multiple channels, and then you worry about the customer experience. Okay, then you pull the content out and you pull those things out into a customer experience that's amazing. And your customer experience is going to change all the time. Talk to any marketing department. They're constantly testing things.
Right.
They're constantly reviewing things. What you do for a customer experience today versus next year could be completely different. And so you need that back end that's flexible and can work to give you the ability to change the customer experience as new digital channels come on board, as new marketing ideas, platforms, integrations, all these things happen. They have to be able to build on that kind of foundation.
Right. And I think that, you could talk about content first all day. I can tell that you're really passionate about this as a concept, because I think that we're seeing a really big growing pain sort of movement with a lot of enterprises and customers and industries where they've made a lot of investment in traditional CMS, in their websites, in a set of customer experiences that are now having to evolve and change more quickly than ever. So when you talk about separating the content from that design, it's more important than ever to do that, because those front ends, those experiences, these marketing departments, they want to iterate fast. And this allows them to help them to do that. James, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about, because that content and design separation, now, how does that work with there's a term that's sort of a really big term called DevOps. And I think one of the things that I've heard you talk about is how content can now be part of DevOps with content first. Can you talk just a little bit about that?
Sure, yeah. But actually, just before I get into that, I just wanted to add one thing is that what we're talking about, sort of the content first approach. One of the biggest challenges I have when we're working with teams that are getting started with headless CMSs is that they still instinctively always start with the website design, and then they work their way backwards. And it's a bit of a backwards way of looking at things sometimes, but it really is critical. So if you find yourself, you're working with a headless CMS such as Agility, and you're trying to build your content architecture based off of a design, that's not content first. That's website first, and then figure everything else later. And as John said, the front end is going to change, and you'll just be constantly changing those things and not keeping a stable back end. So certainly something to keep in mind, and it takes a while to get used to it, even for myself. But the benefits in the long run, they're there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's a great point, James. People jump on a headless CMS and think they're going to get all the benefits of a headless CMS by having the same mindset they had before. A headless CMS is a CMS that's focused on allowing you to set it up in a content-first approach. And then it also has an API to be able to use content-first kind of tactics to push that content to your channels. So that's really what a headless CMS is. So, for everyone listening, don't just say, oh, I need a headless CMS and jump on it. You need to change your mindset a little bit of how you roll it out as well, and make sure that you're taking a content-first approach. I know that one thing that Joel and I have been working with a lot of customers is this whole notion that, you still do have content that's just for your website that you won't use anywhere else. It's not reused. It's specific to your website. It's like your, get started button in the corner, or your navigation on your specific website. So there are pieces of content that are just for your website. But there's a lot of content that you need to share and you need to relate. So you need to think about all that content first, and then you can have either a separate instance completely for your website that's just about content for your website, or a very separated kind of area where you can manage that. I know for us in Agility, we actually have this notion of pages and page objects, and we look at it as a page object as just a type of content, whether it goes to your website, whether it goes to an app, whether it goes to a display board. But some headless CMSs have no notion of pages at all. A lot of them didn't even have rich text editors for a long time. So there is this kind of hybrid thing where you need to look at all your content from a content-first perspective, and then there's additional content you will add in that may be channel-specific, website, app, all these different things, and you need to separate those and think of it in that order of operations. But yeah, just jumping on a headless CMS won't give you content first, but it does push you in that direction. So traditional CMSs that add APIs may say, oh, we're a headless CMS now. It does not make them a headless CMS. It makes them a CMS with headless capabilities. Right. But you still have to come in with that content-first approach. And most headless CMSs push that. We've always called it content architecture. Since back in 2003, 2004, we called it content architecture. We would sit down with customers. We actually started from their website. I'll be totally honest. We started from the website and said, what's the content you have here that you need to share in different areas? How do you need to reuse it? We used that. We moved it back and built out your news list and your press releases and all your chunks of content, defined those schemas, and then said, where do they go on your website? Or in some customers' other channels as well. So we did a hybrid of content architecture, which was half content first, half website first, but it was very focused on the user experience and content management. And I think I lean towards that as one of the biggest reasons we've been successful over the years.
Right. And James, I want to come back to the DevOps point, but I think we have some slides on technology later, and maybe that point will be better in those slides.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, let's move on.
Yeah. So the next question I had is really talking about, again, this shift away from traditional. One of the things that gets associated with traditional CMS is monolithic suites, like you mentioned DXP before. So how is the industry sort of changing with this shift towards content first, towards headless?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I'm really going to look at this from the business standpoint, not from the technology side, but obviously it relates to the two. People's expectations are higher than ever. I want it faster. I want it easier. Yes. I want to integrate with everything that I have. Look at a company's stack of platforms. I don't want to get too much in the technology side here, but they just have so many platforms they want to integrate: marketing automation, analytics programs, lead generation tool. I can go on and on. There's so many different platforms that need to work together. And then even now, every year there's new multi-channel, new channels coming on. So VR, AR, apps, display boards, TV, your website or multiple websites. So the trick is having a system that's really, really flexible, and it's such a need in this day and age. A platform that's flexible allows you to do all those things, but also one that's agile enough to let you change things quickly. So a perfect example is this, right in the middle of this COVID situation. So yes. I don't know how many of our customers had to pivot quickly, not just change what they had digitally on their website or things like that, but change their fundamental business. We have companies that are now putting all the money into one section of the business that works okay virtually and doesn't work in the other area. And so what do you have to change digitally to support that? Is it messaging? Is it actual, a new online store? Is it, a new online community? So you have to be able to change quickly. So it's funny, how is the industry changing? It's changing by changing even faster and faster all the time.
Right.
So
we're forced to change so that we're getting better at changing because we've been forced to change extremely quickly.
Exactly. So the key is not to get stuck into, having in your mind, you're going to build something and it's going to be done and it's not going to change. You have to build with the notion that things are changing all the time. And I don't think that's slowing down. I think it's going to go faster and faster, and we need more and more tools that work together and can be changed and swapped out and tweaked and adjusted. Like Headless CMS, the front end website is pulling content through APIs. So if you want to swap out that Headless CMS down the road, it's a lot easier than a traditional CMS with the code and everything's all tied together. So people just want that flexibility to say, next year maybe we'll do this or we'll do that.
Certainly.
Yeah, and I think if you're looking at the tech industry in general, there's just so many more specialized, SaaS apps in particular. These are, specialized applications or software services that do the exact things you need to do, and they do them very well. There's startups all the time doing, great things. And so I think with the, if you're a tech leader, your company, you really need to be paying attention to how these smaller specialized apps that are sort of best of breed, how you can take those into your organization and take advantage of those, as opposed to this sort of old school mentality of having a traditional CMS that has all of these sort of features built in, like e-commerce, personalization, all of those things built into the CMS means you're kind of stuck in there and you can't really take advantage of these external services. So I think you want to put yourselves in a situation where if something hot comes on the market and you say, I want to use it and I want to start right away, you should be able to do that.
Yeah, it's a great question.
We're in a situation where I think, John, what you've both been saying is, we need more agile tools, and businesses are actually taking advantage of these more agile pieces of, tools and stacks of their business so that they can respond to change more quickly.
Yeah, definitely. Like we moved from Salesforce to Pipedrive, and Salesforce, we had Salesforce. We had all these like things that it could do. It can do lots of things across the board: support, service, cloud, marketing cloud, all these different areas. And we moved away from that to Pipedrive. We have Zendesk for ticketing. We have Autopilot for marketing automation. So all these specialized tools work much better than one big platform. And it allows you to swap them in, as James kind of said, which gives you a lot of flexibility going forward.
Yeah, and just gives you greater overall capabilities. But I will say one thing, and that is, and I think this is going to be a change we're going to see in the market as well, is that, having someone let's say you're a medium to large organization, having someone dedicated in a role to be able to sort of control all of these different applications, to be able to make sure that they link together, is becoming super, super critical. Someone who becomes specialized in those. I know, the sort of term product ops is another way of looking at that. And that role is starting to become very popular. Because you're going to have all these specializers that do things very well, but you still need to have someone who sort of understands how they all work together. Otherwise, you're not going to get all the benefits of those.
Yeah, and I think that's great to see a change in the industry too. If you go back 20 years ago, it was IT that was coming in and saying, use this CMS. And then, 5 years after that, marketing was like, what are you doing picking our system? This is crazy. We're trying to do all our work and we can't do anything. And now you actually see a synergy between the teams. So IT has to vet saying, this will work with our other systems. This has our security check marks. This has, the technical capabilities we need as an organization, or these three platforms do. And then marketing will come in and say, okay, now we'll evaluate those three from a usability, from a feature standpoint, from a let's get our job done properly standpoint. So there's a really good synergy between those. And I think your point's really valid, James. What a lot of companies that are on the bigger side that can afford to get additional roles, they get that person that works between those teams, that kind of makes sure that IT is happy with it, make sure it works for marketing, and can make sure it collaborates with the other platforms they have in place. And that really gets the most value out of the platform as a whole.
Yeah, and it's not just an IT person. It's someone. It's kind of like like I don't know, not a project manager, but it's someone who can really communicate to all those different teams effectively, right?
Yeah.
Sort of bridge that gap. Yeah.
More of a project manager on the digital team.
Yeah, and if we're, this webinar is about the future of CMS and the future of the industry. But if you really look at right now, a lot of those things that I think were considered future thinking are now, they've become right now because of COVID, because of a few of the things. One of the things is we're all working remotely. Most teams are remote now. So these tools that that help us with collaboration and they do things well, and these people that kind of sit between departments are more important than ever, especially in a remote working world. So that has changed the industry a lot to sort of, I think, a faster thinking mindset that you were talking about, John.
Yeah, definitely.
So let's move from the sort of the industry side of things and talk. I don't want to get too technical, but how is technology, especially when we talk about the tools, as James was saying, these specialized SaaS products that are these tools for business these days. These are the things that are driving enterprises forward with very specific, very targeted tools. How is the technology changing as a result of that tooling, of us being more collaborative? And having, better synergy between, marketing and IT and stuff like that.
Yeah, I think it's all about, how the industry is changing, the technology is following. So I talked about people wanting things faster, better integrations, sharing content across multi-channel, those type of capabilities. And so the technologies that support those the most are the ones taking off. So there's a huge jump in client side, JavaScript type of developments, JavaScript integrations, API webhooks, which, for those who don't know, allow when you're in the system, you do something in the system and it triggers off some event. And then you can run your own code or do whatever you kind of need there. And these three things, JavaScript specifically for multi-channel, because if you think about it, JavaScript is probably the only programming language that I can think of that goes across almost every channel you can think of. So even TVs can run JavaScript.
Smart TVs are almost all JavaScript, yeah.
Yeah, IoT devices, they almost everything supports, that JavaScript protocol. So it's really cool to see JavaScript taking off because it supports that multi-channel. And then with APIs and webhooks, you're able to do integrations, you're able to move faster because you can use whatever tools you want. The webhooks allow you to do all sorts of cool things. I think the second side, the technology that's going to be pushing is that, we've had to integrate a lot of these technologies and a lot of these different things very fast. We want things faster. The thing people are going to start to want next, I think, is how do you do more drag and drop integrations with, platforms like Zapier, Microsoft Flow, these other ones, right, where they're almost plug and play. Headless APIs and these standards is still fairly new in terms of standards across APIs and things. There's GraphQL, there's a couple other technologies out there, but when can you get a UI builder or a other thing that you just plug into this Headless CMS or you plug it into that CMS and you kind of plug and play these integrations? I think that's going to be the next big technology change, where there's some standard across that side of things.
Yeah, I think you really nailed it there. It's integrations, and that needs to become better, because if you're having all these different services that can do great things well, they need to integrate better together. And, speaking from developer experience myself, writing integrations isn't exactly the funnest thing to do, and they change and they break and all that kind of thing. So moving that into, like you said, more of a no-code setup that you can rely upon, and there are some great third-party tools out there right now, like you said, like Azure Logic Apps, and I think Microsoft Flow got renamed to Power something, or
Power Apps.
It did, yeah.
Power Apps or something, yeah,
something like that.
And Zapier, like those, or if this then that, those sort of services I think are really going to take off, and I think we're going to start to see more of those kind of interfaces even within other products.
Yeah, and maybe let's actually. I think what you said, they have taken off. They are really big. I think people are making decisions today to sort of, in a lot of cases, to say, well, I have this big product, but I don't understand how it works. But if I want to do things like personalization, there's a tool I can use, Optimizely, for that. It does that really well. I want to do something with automation, I can use Zapier. It does that really well. I want to do e-commerce. Ooh, Shopify does e-commerce really well. And that's a tool. This is a tool. And I can pull all these things together. And you talked about a stack, John. Those are, I think that's technology as a stack of those tools, as opposed to trying to say, here's a big suite that does everything. You know, you talked about moving off of Salesforce. Salesforce is a great example of a massive suite of we do everything. But does everyone know even all the different parts of what it does? You know, you kind of need a computer science degree in that specific platform just to know all the things that it does.
Yeah.
And I really like talking about JavaScript. It's as interesting as a computer science person myself. JavaScript is a very high level language. It's easy to learn. 75% of the world's developers know JavaScript. So we're making the code easier, but also we're getting into a place where people who they don't necessarily know any code, they can actually work with all these tools now. And I think that's kind of like, we're on the cusp of that being easy.
Yeah, definitely. And I just want to call out that Patrick from NVIDIA just mentioned that Flow got renamed to Power Automate. So, you know, people are renaming their products, and these products are taking off because they're adding so much capability to these other systems, whether it's CMS or whatever else that might happen. I think also, you know, on the technology side, how headless technology is changing. Obviously, you know, headless CMSs have nailed the API, have nailed that kind of, you know, webhook API side of things. They've also nailed the client side things. A lot of Jamstack technologies are very, very heavily integrated with headless CMSs, where you can statically generate your site and do all sorts of really cool things there. But I think on the headless side, the part that's still being flushed out is the user experience around for marketing teams, where they do need to still manage a head, like a website or some tool like that. So you know, we've built in some capabilities because we've been around for so long. We've seen the need. We've had the need to build in page objects and these other things, which people can use if they want to, or they can build their own kind of objects. But what people are doing with current headless CMSs that don't have page objects is they're just creating their own definitions for pages. And then you don't have those enhanced features around that. So whether the whole market goes to additional technologies that plug into headless to give you more head capabilities, or whether headless CMSs start to have modules that add on for, you know, an app, a mobile app head or a website head, or whatever these different components are, time will tell. Maybe we'll talk about that a little bit more on the future side of things. But it's very interesting that, you know, those are needs that marketers and users have today. And I think that's how technology is in the current flux of changing and trying to figure out how we solve those problems.
Yeah, that's a good point. And it's actually something that I see a lot with developers that are sort of moving to headless, is they kind of forget about page management. They're like, oh, I just have this, you know, this table of content I can query, and I'm going to sprinkle this in my code on the pages that I create. Yeah. But they completely miss the mark on, you know, okay, well, add a new page and change what content is on a page. A lot of the times that decision is made for them by the developer, which really limits new types of content. And so, you know, just because you're headless doesn't mean that's the way it has to be.
Interesting. So we've kind of established, I think we've established a lot of different things about industry, about technology, about where we're at right now and how we've been forced to change quickly, which leads to the next question for you, John. What's the future of CMS? You know, when I think of the future, I think of like self-driving cars, VR, stuff like that. Well, that's actually not really much of the future. That's kind of the now almost. Yeah. What's going to be in the future for CMS?
Yeah, and it kind of relates to how the industry is changing. You know, we talked about people wanting things faster. We talked about easier integrations. I think we're only at the starting point of what has happened and what is needed in that side of CMS, specifically headless CMS. So I see a huge shift of people moving to headless CMS. We've already seen a massive movement. You know, not only people who understand it well come in and say, I want this because of X, Y, Z. We have people come in asking for it when they don't even know what headless CMS is. It's just such a buzzword and everyone's excited, and there's some really good rollouts. Now, it's not to say every rollout is successful though. And that's because people go in maybe not understanding exactly what they need to do. You know, headless CMSs don't generally have pre-built templates or pre-built modules. And I think the industry is going away from that for a certain type of website. People are going to move to more custom solutions in terms of what they are providing to their customer, in a more agile, more flexible, and quicker way to build. So using these client-side technologies, that's definitely JavaScript is taking the market by storm. If you follow or really on top of the things, Jamstack, these technologies, with the load of how many people are requesting content, with the load of what the need is for content out there, these technologies can give you better security and better performance. So a lot of people are moving there. And then, just a system that works so well with other systems, whether that is integrating directly, integrating on the front end, integrating on the back end, however that is going to be the future of CMS. CMS will be a central hub, and it will connect to all these apps around it. And then the next big part, which we haven't talked about much in terms of industry or technology, and how it's currently being, how the demand is there, but more in just the trend of where the world is going, is personalized content. So personalization has been out a long time. And lots of systems have it, whether it's built in, whether it's optimized and tied on, or whatever it is. The problem is teams can't effectively manage it 99% of the time, because you have to have multiple variants of content. You have to understand who your persona is, which, we're getting better. We have a lot of analytics to know who's visiting our site or visiting our app or doing whatever. We don't always connect them from this channel to this channel that well. So there's a lot of missing holes there to really take advantage of personalization. And personalization of content will be something in the future where, you have this beautiful model of content, and then personalization is this kind of layer between it and all your channels. And your content gets served and distributed through the web or through whatever technology, at the appropriate time, knowing exactly what that user is. Because we are in an age of information overload, and it's not getting any easier. There's too much content there. When I go to a website and I look at one page, there's probably 10 to 20% on that page that is interesting to me, and the rest is fluff or things I don't need. So the world is going to change to solutions and interfaces for customer experience where I get exactly what I need. And it's what I'm looking for. And then I go to the next spot and it's what I'm looking for. And so the systems need to change the system, and whether that's the CMS itself or the CMS just becomes a repository is kind of unknown at this point. I think it'll become more of the repository, and you add on other systems that will do more advanced things to kind of connect and funnel that content.
Because they can integrate better than ever, because that's another thing we were talking about. Yeah.
Yes. And they need to work with other systems that really know who are you asking for this content. Am I going into a system and it's scanning my retina and then it knows everything that I love and do whatever and doesn't give me anything I don't care about? Who knows where that's going to go? But generally, content has to be more specialized, more personalized, more direct. Otherwise, we just won't get good conversion. There's just too much content. There's too much things. Even our website, we have developers we have to support. We have partners, which is more than just developers, a whole bunch of different people. We have marketers and editors. We have content writers. We have, digital, the role you talked about, James, these kind of digital project managers who are, or product ops that are managing all the things. So a lot of different people all looking for different pieces of information. And if they start reading the wrong thing, it's just wasting their time. So it's really about optimization and utilization of getting the right experience for the right person. And that will take not just CMS, but a lot of different systems. So they have to work well together.
Yeah. And I think as technology catches up to these needs, there's going to be more standardization of practices to allow things to actually integrate a lot easier. Because right now, everyone's sort of doing their own thing, and then they sort of magically work together. And I think there's going to be a push, not immediately, but over the years, where everything's going to become quite standard. It's going to be just like Joel. I think you had sent me an article the other day where it was kind of like, it was kind of like radio, right? Where it took a long time for standards to be introduced, but that stuff, technology's been around for 80 years.
Yeah, totally.
more.
So yeah, and I think it's a great segue to what I want to talk about next, because people are kind of doing their own thing. They're kind of making up stuff as they go, and we're starting to see things solidify, which leads to me to the answer of, what should I do and what can I do right now that's going to help me be future proof, to sort of set me up for success in the future. It's going to take advantage of some of these things that are either they're just starting to happen, or we think that they're going to be important in the future.
Yeah, I love this question because, it's great to talk about what lies in for the future, but you can't really totally prepare for it. Look at COVID, and how it caught people off guard in the situation lots of people are in. So you can't 100% know what's going to happen and where things are going to go, but what you can do is optimize for things that will help you now and will help you future-proof your investment going forward. So to start, everyone needs to build a content first mentality. You have to focus on how you manage your content and update things, because the great thing about this is not only does it help you right now with your current team today in terms of optimizing, managing, distributing content, but it also helps you in the future, because how you're managing your content doesn't affect the customer experience. So if the customer experience needs to be a completely new front end, a completely new direction, you can do that and keep your back-end content model. Obviously, you may expand your content model over time, you may change it, but that framework can last a really long time. We have customers that have been with us over 10 years, and some of them have maintained the back end over those years and just changed the front end, 3 or 4 or 5 times, redesigned, everything from accessibility needs over the last 10 to 15 years to responsive design, to SEO changes and all those things. And it's not to say they don't need to step back and clean up their content model, because that needs to happen on a regular basis too. You get new people coming in, you get new types of content, and just get built on. So you have to be optimizing your content model as well, but a good foundation will help you now and in the future. The other thing I'd like to say is, don't get so stuck on having something 100% perfect in terms of both your content model and your user experience. And it might sound bad because everyone wants to have utopia and the perfect model, but the thing to really sit back and think about is the users that are consuming your content, the users that are interacting with your website. Those people are changing day by day. So what they want today may change next week. So you might get something perfect for them today, and then a week later they're like, well, actually now I want this, or now I want that. So if you overly focus too much on just trying to get something in a static setup that's like great for today, and don't think about how it's going to change over time, you're kind of shooting yourself in the foot. And to get something to that extra 100% takes so much effort. So spend the energy on something that's flexible, something that's agile, something that can change over time. Get it 80% of the way there, and then over the next 3 or 4 months, do another 80% that's more relevant to that time frame. And then the next quarter or the next 6 months, do another iteration and a change, both from a content standpoint, from a user experience standpoint. And then you can have a much better conversion, much more great foundation going forward. So really what you can do now is really learn about this content first approach, learn how you can make the back end and your content a really good model, and then put something in place like a headless CMS that gives you the APIs, the webhooks, some of these client side technologies that are multi-channel. Even if you don't use multi-channel now, you might need to next year, or you might need to do this other webhook connection with another system, 3 months down the road. Put those things in place now so that you have those capabilities and that flexibility when you need it.
So yeah, so there's a bunch of stuff you can do. Like you're saying, take small steps to get towards your goal. And one of the things that I think we're sort of seeing it with folks is, at one point, a digital presence, it was important. Long time ago, back in the olden days of like 2003, back when you were in front of the table there, that was like, it was almost a novelty. It's like, yeah, you got to have a website too. Then it was important. Now, and even then there was a time when it was kind of essential. Now it's your first thing. There's a world now where you can't go into a store to buy stuff. You can only do it online for a lot of cases. So now it's the primary, critical, essential thing. But and so you can do a little bit to get towards that goal and take these little, hey, I need to get this, get it online. I need to do this thing, get it online, fix the back end, get that nice so that we can build this other thing in the future.
Yeah, evolution versus revolution. Don't start from scratch and just rewrite everything and assume that that change is static, evolve over time, tweak and adjust continually. It's an ongoing process. It's not a winter race and I'm done. It's a marathon, running around the planet and continue running.
Yeah. And, it takes me back to what is the mission of Agility, is to help create better leaders. We want to help people to become better leaders within their own organizations. And the piece of advice that actually, I think it was James that you had read and gave to all of us is, if you want to be a better leader, you teach other people, and to learn the material that you're to learn the technology, to learn these new concepts, teach it to somebody else. So, we've been talking here, and we've been having a chance to hear John talk about a whole lot of really, really some high level, some low level, a lot of concepts that cover a lot of stuff. This will be available as a recording that you can then review. We do have time for questions as well, so that's great. But also, now's your chance to go teach it, which is actually one of the core values of Agility. Go teach it to your coworkers, to your friends, to people that you know. Take these concepts and try to put them out into the world and use them. They will have a much more deep impact on you.
Yeah, so some of the, a lot of our people listening are either other partners or potential partners, but they're also customers as well. And a lot of times, the partners need to teach their customers and teach their team so they can speak this language. And then on the customer side, often you need to teach your whole team, because a content first mindset and some of these things are it's not just like one person needs to know it. And James talked about that product ops person. They kind of know it inside out and connect everything. But if your content editors are just throwing up content and not thinking about how it's reused or thinking about how it can be modeled better, you will get in a model or a situation where you kind of go backwards and you start thinking about the wrong direction. So it needs to be taught, it needs to be trained, and we will, as Joel said, be sharing this webinar, and it's a great thing to send around to some people to listen to about where things are going and how to change your mindset.
Great. We do have a few extra minutes. If anyone has any questions, now's the time to do the raise your hand thing, or just to type something out. But I think that there was one other sort of piece that, that is sort of around all of this is just the first webinar. We're going to be having these every 2 weeks. The next one coming up, actually, I should switch the slide before I start talking. So yeah, ask those questions if you can. This is just the start of the conversation. We will be doing these, as I said, every 2 weeks. So you can go to agilitycms.com/events to see what the next events are. I can tell you now, the next event's coming up in, I think it's 2 weeks, and James is going to be leading that one.
Yeah, it's coming up May 21st. We're working on posting it, just finishing up with the details now. But I can tell you a little bit about it. We're going to be doing a deep dive web performance audit on someone's very unlucky website. So yeah, we're welcoming a few guests. One of them is the organizer of the Jamstack Toronto meetup. He's also the leader of the Toronto Web Performance meetup. And we're also getting a UX designer as well to join us as we take a deep dive on a website and see what we can do to make it faster.
Cool. And then, so that's on the development track. And then there will be another one a couple of weeks after that, that's on the digital leaders track again. And more details will be announced about that soon. As always, if you want to get in touch, you can email us at sales@agilitycms.com. Also follow us on Twitter. We're actively posting stuff on there, and a lot of sort of our ideas or things that are industry specific that could be really useful to you are on there. So follow us at Agility CMS. I don't think there's any other questions. And I think that we're just about at the time, around an hour. So I think we did good for timing. I want to thank John for joining us all the way from Vancouver, getting up early in the morning.
Thank you for having me, guys. It's a topic I'm very passionate about. We've always been talking about content architecture, which is really the same thing as Contentfirst, and it can go so far. So really excited to chat about it. Yeah. And I'm sure we're going to have a couple more discussions on it going forward, and with the other panels. I know some are about Contentfirst and things like that.
Yeah, we have one webinar in particular where we really take a deep dive on content architecture, where we'll actually go through some real life examples and things. So, we can really dive into that later. Yeah.
Okay, I want to thank everyone for both for registering and for attending. To those who are viewing us on the live stream or on the recording, please don't hesitate to get in touch, and we look forward to hearing from you. And take care, everyone.
Have a great day, everyone.